Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
They don't use the word Christmas because it's not politically correct. You go to department stores and they'll say Happy New Year and they'll say other things and it'll be red, they'll have it painted, but they don't say, well, guess what? We're saying Merry Christmas again.
That was President Trump vowing to put Christ back in Christmas. It is a promise that he made throughout the campaign, and he has been delivering, even putting the words Merry Christmas on the White House Christmas card. Can you imagine, for the first time in almost 10 years? So what does this movement towards keeping Christmas in the holiday season mean for the country? Here now, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council. He met with the president just last week to offer counsel on religious issues. Tony, good to see you as always. Tell us about your meeting with the president on religious issues. What did you talk about?
Well, Martha, one of the things we were talking about was the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But the president was really striking there in the Oval Office. He said, hey, Merry Christmas. You know, we can say Merry Christmas again. And as you said, the White House has made it very prominent in all of their displays, not only the decorations, but as you pointed out, the Christmas card that the White House sends out, which it's been absent in the last 8 years. We've moved away from the political correct Happy Holidays to Merry Christmas. And I think, Martha, it's very, very important to understand that this is about a lot more than just, some assault on Santa Claus once a year. This is about an ongoing attack on religious freedom in the public square. And when the president made this a center point of his campaign as a candidate, the media kind of wondered, what's this all about? But it was a very clear message that the president understood that the ability to express your faith in the public square was under assault, and he was going to be pushing back on that.
Yeah, I think people are relieved when you say Merry Christmas to them. I think they're happy to say it back to you.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that, I think it's the sort of generification of faith that really people don't like. They don't like season's greetings and happy holidays. We have the card from years past, which said season's greetings from the White House. I don't think it means anything really to anyone. There was also a ceremony for Hanukkah, a menorah ceremony for Hanukkah that was at the White House as well. I think you want to recognize the richness of the different religions and the faiths that people practice in the country, not diminish them by making them something generic.
Right. 9 out of 10 of Americans, according to Pew Research, celebrate Christmas, and 2/3 of those recognize and believe the biblical story of Christmas, that Christ was born as a child in a manger in Bethlehem. He came to be the Savior of mankind. It was announced by angels. And so most Americans believe that. But you are right in terms of people feel relieved when you say Merry Christmas. I've tried this in many stores. Every time I go someplace, I say Merry Christmas.
Like, oh, Merry Christmas. And people go, oh, yeah, Merry Christmas. Yeah. Merry Christmas to you, too.
Absolutely, because they're afraid. Most Americans are not looking for conflict, and we've had this cultural creation of conflict over Christmas because it is seen as a religious expression, because most Americans see it as a religious holiday. So the president coming to the forefront and saying, look, we're going to say Merry Christmas again. It is a signal to say, you know what, it's okay to express yourself on religious issues in our culture. Right. And his policies have followed that. We're going to the executive order on religious liberty. We're hearing from federal employees, career employees that are saying, you know what, we've never seen this before. They're calling us all in and saying, hey, this is Christmas time. Feel free to say Merry Christmas. Enjoy this time with your family and friends. And he said, this is a breath of fresh air. And this is how the president is using, quote unquote, the bully pulpit to restore freedom in the country again.
Yeah, I want to ask you about one other thing before you leave on the world scale, because there's so much persecution of Christians in the Middle East. It's a hard time for them at Christmas. You know, your thoughts on what we need to focus on with regard to that in 2018.
Well, I was just over in the Middle East a month ago, meeting with Christians in Egypt and in Jordan. And, you know, they're asking, pray for us. This is a remarkable time for them. In fact, today I was speaking with a Arab Christian pastor in Bethlehem. He is the pastor of First Baptist Church in Bethlehem. That's a pretty good deal, being the pastor of First Baptist in Bethlehem. But they're under intense pressure, a majority Arab Muslim culture, and they're saying, pray for us, pray that we can be light and truth in this culture, because we're seeing a lot of Muslims come to Christ, and they're saying, pray for us that we'll be bold and courageous.
Tony Perkins, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to you, sir. We'll see you soon.
Merry Christmas to you as well. Thank you.
It is Tuesday, December 26th of 2017, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am Justice Putnam, your chef de cuisine, and I'm glad that you joined us today. If you missed the board out front, it is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, our daily special. We have a daily special for each day of the week that we are open, and we are so appreciative that you have joined us today. Tony Perkins and Fox News. Now that's an escalating the war on Christmas. They just can't stop, even when Christmas is over. Huh. Well, all I can say to that is Happy New Year. Apparently that's a phrase that the people at Fox News, the propagandists, and Tony Perkins, Family Research Council, former KKK Grand Dragon, by the way. Let's not forget that. They don't want the war on Christmas to stop, because people are saying Happy Hanukkah and Happy New Year. Very interesting. Well, I had a lovely holiday. I hope you folks did too. Relatively quiet. Did have a little bit of a discussion with a not immediate family member, but a family member who has been brainwashed by the local Sinclair broadcasting group into believing that MS-13 have been recruiting Puerto Ricans to come to America to behead people for not helping them in the hurricane. And I just said, that's propaganda. And I will say that we had a little back and forth, not angrily, of course, but a little back and forth. But the general consensus is that I was the one who is not really a Christian and isn't really festive in the holiday season, because I brought up propaganda and politics at a holiday gathering. Of course, saying MS-13 has recruited Puerto Ricans to behead people in the continental United States for not helping during the hurricane. That's just matter of fact. Everybody knows that. Huh. Well, I guess it's my job to put the lie to that, and I did. And then later we actually had a really good Christmas dinner, open presents, and I think I did get a Fox News' propaganda dig in there somewhere. Well, that made my Christmas grand. Okay, today we will be discussing the Trump administration lifting the ban on making viruses more deadly and transmissible. Another one of those regulations that Obama wanted, and that just must not stand. Okay, Trump's cabinet is carrying out a far-right agenda in secret while refusing to follow disclosure laws. Wow, the same thing that happened in Putin's Russia. What a coincidence. And the UK government fears Trump could react very badly if the Obamas are invited to the royal wedding. Okay. Well, the Obamas have known the royal family a lot longer and been more intimately involved in family functions than Trump. The only intimacy Trump ever endeavored in the royal family was hitting on Diana when she basically kicked him to the curb. So let's be clear. And after the break, of course, we move to the chef's table, where we will examine how Trump just kicked off a global tax war as other countries have launched a race to the bottom to undermine the new U.S. corporate tax cuts. And Trump's plan to separate immigrant children from their parents revives a tactic used by, you guessed it, Nazi Germany. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. All right, as we're settled in here in the front cafe, why don't we start off with this first offering from the menu today on Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. This is by Callie Holloway out of Alternate. Some horror movie tropes just come off as unbelievable. They're so ridiculous and overused, like girl who falls down for no apparent reason while being chased by a killer, or group of friends that decides to split up when it's obvious being alone will get you murdered. And then there's this one. Science laboratory creates horrible disease that will inevitably escape and kill all of humanity, which might be the most unbelievable, since it defies both logic and actual laws. Or rather, it did until yesterday, Christmas Day, when the U.S. government announced it was lifting a 3-year ban on federal funding for experiments that alter viruses that make them even deadlier. Okay. Gain-of-function research, in which scientists make pathogens more powerful or easily transmissible, is aimed at preventing disease outbreaks by better understanding how they might occur. The studies allow scientists working in a highly controlled environment to learn how a flu virus might mutate into a superbug capable of killing millions. A sort of game of wits played to gain insight into nature's unpredictability. The ultimate goal is to proactively create vaccines, medications, and other solutions to stop contagion in its tracks. Now, I am obviously a science advocate, but there's also in those science movies that are totally unbelievable of the mad scientist. The one who, for whatever reason, decides, well, maybe the world needs to suffer. And I just happen to have this pathogen here that could kill, well, if not all of humanity, most of it. Wouldn't that be nice? And truly, isn't that something, regardless of whether it's been in the movies or not, isn't that something that, on many levels, I mean, we don't want mad scientists giving, well, the Pakistanis the nuclear bomb. Oops, too late. Okay. The National Institutes of Health Policy reverses a 2014 Obama administration funding ban on gain-of-function research projects, and specifically involving all forms of the influenza virus, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, and severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS. The new rules could extend beyond those viruses, applying to any pathogen that could potentially cause a pandemic, according to the New York Times. For example, they would apply to a request to create an Ebola virus transmissible through the air. If you build it, they will spread it. You know they will. I mean, I love the idea of a controlled environment. I mean, you need a controlled environment, say like the whole of the Bay Area. Why don't we just spray the flu virus in the Bay Area and then count how many people get sick so that we can, assess how we will try to prevent these pathogens from creating a pandemic. Oh yeah, that wasn't a movie. Oh yeah, that actually happened. You can look it up. Possibly aware that this sounds like the prologue to a very hacky and tacky horror movie, the National Institutes of Health accompanied this announcement with a list of criteria that proposals must meet before funding will be granted. You know, are you involved with any hostile foreign governments? And are you lying now when you're telling me that you're not? Is that question going to be on the list? We have a responsibility to ensure that research with infectious agents is conducted responsibly and that we consider the potential biosafety and biosecurity risks associated with such research. And that was NIH Director Francis S. Collins. I am confident that the thoughtful review process will help to facilitate the safe, secure, and responsible conduct of this type of research in a manner that maximizes the benefits to public health. Well, we would hope. They also said that taxes were going to make everybody rich. And what they meant by everybody was the collective select few. That's everybody. All of us would be everyone else. Not everybody gets rich. They are everybody. We're everyone else. Okay. Despite those reassurances, critics continue to express concern about potential mishaps. I know, what could go wrong? I mean, have they really found out what the hell happened with the anthrax in the envelopes and all of that? Was that a bad scientist? Well, I don't know. Or was that Russian active measures? Or was it a disgruntled employee in some part of the supply chain? We don't know. There's some precedent for this. In 2014, CNN reported that dozens of workers at the CDC had been accidentally exposed to anthrax while others had mishandled samples of the bacteria. We're not even talking about how anthrax gets into an envelope and then mailed to elected officials of the United States. We're just talking about somebody dropping a wrench in the missile silo and the whole thing going up in flames. A wrench! Harvard epidemiologist Mark Lipsitch offered tepid support, telling the Times the approval panels are a small step forward, but cautioning that gain-of-function experiments has given us some modest scientific knowledge and done almost nothing to improve our preparedness for pandemics, and yet risked creating an accidental pandemic. Well, yeah. Conversely, Stony Brook University president and biomedical researcher Samuel Stanley worries that the NIH decision, after 3 years of a funding prohibition in this area, may be too little and just a wee bit too late. There has been increased scrutiny of laboratories working in this area, which can lead to an even more robust culture of safety, he told NPR. But I also fear that the moratorium may have delayed vital research that could have long-lasting effects on the field. I believe nature is the ultimate bioterrorist, and we need to do all we can to stay one step ahead. And with that kind of attitude, Mother Nature's going to get mad at you and figure out something that you haven't figured out, and goodbye. I keep saying, organisms that are beneficial to each other tend to survive over a long period of time, and those who are in conflict with each other tend to kill each other, and then they're gone. All right, this next course here in the Front Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by the great Sarah K. Burris from Raw Story. The only news that tends to surface from Donald Trump's cabinet is when one of them battles with Donald Trump, says something absurd, or when one of them is plagued with scandal. Other than that, members have largely hidden behind the skirt of their boss. Well, yesterday, on Christmas Day, however, Politico detailed the ways in which Trump's cabinet is secretly carrying out a far-right agenda without the scrutiny that comes from the public's awareness. You know, in this reporter's opinion, that would be a representative Democratic Republic. Of the 17 cabinet officials, 7 refuse to release any public information on their schedules or travel. For some, the only way to discover the public activities is through Freedom of Information Act requests through their office. 3 additional departments, including Agriculture, Labor, Homeland Security, and Education, give only the schedules of the secretaries, but with limited details. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin's schedules became public less than a month ago. You know, when you're feeling up, you know, the gold bars and the freshly printed stacks of money at Fort Knox. You know, I mean, you can't schedule that. That's just like I don't know, spontaneous. It's a need, and you don't know when it's going to happen when you have that need. Okay, 7 cabinet officials are also refusing to release meetings that they've had, who they met with, and any travel, which Politico revealed was a possible violation of the Freedom of Information Act. I think since Politico is a journalistic organization, they have to say possible. Because it is a violation of FOIA. The law requires agencies to make records promptly available to any person. And I suppose it hinges on the word prompt. Some people, prompt means overnight. To other people, it means, well, a couple of years. But it still has to be released. How officials spend their time is the best window into what their priorities are, said former Obama State Department lawyer Austin Evers, who now leads American Oversight, a watchdog group that sued to obtain the schedule of EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. When public officials resist public disclosure of what they do, people should be skeptical of what they are trying to hide. Well, of course they should. Once Evers obtained Pruitt's information, it revealed the secretary was holding meetings with the heads of the industries he was supposed to be regulating. Well, how are you going to regulate them if you don't know what you're supposed to let them do? I mean, it's not like Scott Pruitt is an expert on all this stuff. He has to go to the experts in the field that are making the most money in that industry and ask them, how can we, as the arms of government that are deconstructing the administrative state, how can we get out of your way so you can do what you want to do? And they tell them, well, you know those national monuments that the black guy designated? There's nothing there. But we do like to mess around with people. Would you open those up for us? And Scott Pruitt would say, well, why aren't they already? In this reporter's opinion, of course. Pruitt uses the word transparency a lot, said Clean Air Task Force Legal Director Ann Weeks. To whom is the transparency being offered? Because it's not the American people, because we're not able to even see who he is talking to. In some side reporting about Pruitt's travels and meetings, when we're talking about heads of industry, we are also talking about ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, how to deconstruct the administrative state in a box. It's a how-to manual. They write the bills in which to destroy our government, and then all the legislators have to do is sign their name. They don't have to compose the bill. Who does that? Legislators don't need to read or write the bills anymore. There's a shop. ALEC does it for them. EPA spokeswoman Liz Bowman alleged that the department has complied with all legal requirements, but those searching for public information are doing nothing more than trying to score political points. Of course, the very act of transparency and the request for transparency is a political act, because that's what a Democratic representative republic is. Will someone tell EPA spokesman Liz Bowman how our government works? Because apparently none of these people learned it when they were, certainly not in the schools and homeschools they went to. And they didn't really pick it up in that crash course that the FSB gives to witting and unwitting assets. One of the cabinet secretaries to have been attacked for his schedule is Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, who's been caught using private jets and military planes to travel in style. And, of course, former Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price was forced to resign for doing exactly the same thing. But, if you're Trump, you look at Price, and he's like, really translucent skin. Ew. And then you look at Zinke, and Zinke's like a man's man, and Trump likes men's men. Like, he can't quit him. And, of course, Zinke, he loves to fly those flags. He has flags that are raised when he's in the interior offices in D.C. And then when he's gone, there's another flag that, So I guess all you need to do is see which flag is raised, and then you'll know Zinke's schedule. You don't need a FOIA request for that. Well, his office wouldn't say whether or not a trip to Bosporus, in which a photo that his wife tweeted of the two of them relaxing on a boat, they won't say if that was a vacation or official purposes or who flew him to Turkey. Military jet, it's got to be. You know that. Office staff has lamented that they're sick of coordinating the personal travel of Zinke's wife, however. FOIA requests caught him spending thousands to take helicopters to events near Washington, D.C., one of which was to go horseback riding with Vice President Mike Pence. Why don't they just go to a merry-go-round? That's about the only kind of horse riding these guys know how to do. I mean, Zinke even, rigged his horse backwards. He rigs his fly tackle backwards. I don't think he knows how to saddle a horse either, even though he's a man's man. Well, Zinke has been scrutinized for possible violations of the Hatch Act. I would say violations, but this is, a respected journalistic organization, and the great Sarah K. Burris adheres to those forms, and well, she should. And he's been violating the Hatch Act by using federal funds to help him do political campaigning. His controversial travel has even prompted Rachel Maddow to bet Zinke will be the next secretary to be voted off the island. All right. So, of course, the act is curious. This whole hiding of their travel and living off the largesse of we the people is curious, given Trump's criticism of Barack Obama that were based on debunked right-wing conspiracy theories. Right? When asked about it, the White House Deputy Press Secretary said that they don't handle schedules for members of the cabinet, so it isn't their problem. The White House expects federal agencies to comply with FOIA requests, Hogan Gridley said in a statement. However, according to Politico, the agencies seem to be doing the opposite. And they do, every time. Last course here at the Front Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Bob Brigham, of Raw Story. Prince Harry's spring wedding to Meghan Markle will be the social event of 2018 for world leaders, but UK Prime Minister Theresa May's government is worried about former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle attending the nuptials. The 33-year-old prince has become good friends with the Obamas since bonding with them during the Invictus Games. The property billionaire does not hide his loathing of Mr. Obama. This is explained by the Sun, of course, and is expected to be enraged if his predecessor gets the coveted call-up when he won't. There are deep fears among senior Foreign Office and Number 10 officials that another perceived national snub will make it impossible for Theresa May to meaningfully engage with Trump. Well, who can? Trump has no plans to visit Britain until at least 2019 over worries about massive protests. When I know I'm going to get a better reception, he said in June, I'll come, not before. Prime Minister May scolded Trump in September and again in November for irresponsible tweets about Britain. Harry has made it clear, the Sun reported, that he wants the Obamas at the wedding, so it's causing a lot of nervousness. Trump could react very badly if the Obamas get to a royal wedding before he has had a chance to meet the Queen. If the Prime Minister lays down the law, Harry will just have to suck it up, the source says, despite the fact that the wedding is not a state occasion. Okay. Don't let the little man-child get upset. He and Kim Jong-un just might want to blow up the world. Jeez. Okay, let's get to our break, and we'll meet everybody back at the chef's table for some more complex dishes. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This special day got me to thinking about America's spirit of giving. And I don't mean this overdone business of Christmas gifts. I mean our true spirit of giving. Giving of ourselves. Yes, we are a country of rugged individualists. Yet there's also a deep, community-minded streak in each of us. We're a people who believe in the notion that we're all in this together, that we can make our individual lives better by contributing to the common good. The establishment media pays little attention to grassroots generosity, focusing instead on the occasional showy donation by what it calls philanthropists. Big tycoons who give a little piece of their billions to some university or museum in exchange for getting a building named after them. But in my mind, the real philanthropists are the millions of you ordinary folks who have precious little money to give, but consistently give of yourselves and do it without demanding that your name be engraved on a granite wall. My own daddy, rest his soul, was a fine example of this. With half a dozen other guys in Denison, Texas, he started the Little League Baseball program, volunteering to build the park, sponsor and coach the teams, run the squawking PA system, etc., etc. Even after I graduated from Little League, Daddy stayed working at it because his involvement was not merely for his kids, but for all. He felt the same way about being taxed to build a public library in town. I don't recall him ever going in that building, much less checking out a book, but he wanted it to be there for the community, and he was happy to pay his part. Not that he was a do-good liberal, for God's sake. Indeed, he called himself a conservative. This is Jim Hightower saying, my daddy didn't even know he had a political philosophy, but he did, and it's the best I've ever heard. He would often say to me, everybody does better when everybody does better. If only our national leaders in Washington and on Wall Street would begin practicing this true American philosophy.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The Constitution clearly gave the U.S. Supreme Court the power to overrule state laws that violate the Constitution or the laws made by Congress. The power is based on the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, Section 2. This makes the Constitution and all laws and treaties approved by Congress in exercising its enumerated powers the supreme law of the land. It also says that judges in state courts must follow the Constitution or federal laws and treaties if there is a conflict with state laws. The national government is supreme in those areas where the Constitution gives it the power to act. For example, suppose a state passes a law allowing factories to pollute the air. Then Congress passes a law controlling the pollution a factory can produce. The national government's laws would have to be obeyed over state laws. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Engelhardt. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
They're among the most amazing events of the wild world. Africa's thundering herds of wildebeest.
And nothing will stop them now.
The incredible migrating monarch butterflies.
One of the great spectacles of nature.
The captivating chorus of the Gulf Corvina. Wait. Haven't heard of that last one?
It's a true wildlife spectacle. The fish this loud, this many fish calling.
Brad Erisman is a fisheries ecologist at the University of Texas at Austin. And to hear him tell it, the chatter of the Corvina fish belongs right up there with those other great spectacles. Every spring, he says, the fish migrate hundreds of miles to the northernmost reaches of the Sea of Cortez. That's the body of water between Baja, California and mainland Mexico. And there, at the Colorado River Delta,
it has this massive synchronous spawning with outgoing tides for about 2 to 3 days, every other week for about 3 months.
And during that time, it also makes this noise, produced by flexing muscles around its swim bladder.
And allows the swim bladder to reverberate, much like any sort of drum.
That simultaneous drumming of hundreds of thousands or even millions of fish is extremely loud.
It's louder than if you were, a meter from the stage at a rock concert.
In fact, Erisman and his colleague Timothy Rowell have found that Corvina chatter rivals the decibel levels produced by whales, loud enough even to damage the hearing of dolphins, making it among the loudest underwater animal sounds on the planet. The aquatic cacophony is written up in the journal Biology Letters, but the sound is under attack by our teeth.
Fried, baked, put it in tacos, or pretty much any way you can think of, you can make Corvina.
Which spells danger for the singing fish.
It's heavily exploited, it's overfished, and we're really concerned about the fishery collapsing.
But by spreading the word about the Corvina's signature sound, Erisman hopes to keep the species and its song from going silent.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with a selection of the day's top world news headlines. The United States is throwing a party. It's been labeled a friendship reception and will be held on January 3rd in New York. The guest list? To get an invite, you needed to either vote with the U.S., abstain, or sit out a UN resolution on Thursday that condemned President Trump's Jerusalem announcement. A total of 64 countries will get an invite. By contrast, 128 countries voted against the United States on Thursday. The U.S. has a new ambassador to the Vatican, Callista Gingrich, wife of the former Republican Speaker of the House and presidential hopeful Newt Gingrich. In a video message last month, Gingrich touted the things the U.S. and the Vatican had in common.
Defending human rights, advancing religious freedom, combating human trafficking, and seeking peaceful solutions to crises around the world.
But dig a little deeper and you'll find many more points of division. Pope Francis has strongly condemned the Trump administration's decision to back away from the Paris Agreement on climate change. He's also expressed misgivings about Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the Israeli capital, his refugee policies, and even questioned whether Trump was truly pro-life after announcing an end to the DACA protections for immigrant children in the United States. And voters in Spanish Catalonia have re-elected pro-independence lawmakers to lead their regional parliament, signaling that a high-stakes push to break away from Spain and form a new country could be far from over. The plan to hold new elections this week was devised by Spain's Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, who feuded bitterly with Catalan independence leaders and hoped new elections would see unionist parties seize control. Thursday's vote is a win for exiled Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont, who fled to Belgium after being threatened with arrest for organizing an October referendum that saw an overwhelming majority of voters back independence. Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
All right, so thank you for accompanying us back to the chef's table. We've broken down the front cafe, so it is returned to its rather sedate and tranquil cookbook store in which we are able to hide the speakeasy in which really the fun and games happens. So welcome. If you would please go to the bottom of our homepage, which I'll today call the menu, and we always do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Scroll down to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You'll notice the chat room link, and that is one way to contact us. Kelly, Roaring Girl, does take care of that function with diligence. And then to the leftish of the chat room link are the contribute donate buttons. That is how we pay our bills. We are unable to do that without you, and we really appreciate your generosity. A way to get a hold of me, of course, is on Twitter. I'm at Justice Putnam, and also at Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. Imagine that. Okay, today's weather here along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon is currently 41 degrees, and it actually felt like 41 when I went out. To me, it felt warm. And it looks like we will be around the same temperatures we had yesterday, which was around 45 degrees. To me, that didn't seem so chilly. We had a fair amount of rain on Christmas Day. I don't think we'll have as much today. In fact, they're calling for none, though there is quite a bit of moisture in the air. We'll have a low of 38 tonight. I believe maybe a little bit chillier than that in the microclimate I am located. Air quality index is good at 10 parts per million. Pressure is at 30.22 inches, and that's low pressure. Visibility is down to 5 miles because the humidity is 82%. Okay. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased, and these people live around the world. London is 46 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 44 and, just ticked to 45 and mostly cloudy with a wind advisory may disrupt electrical infrastructure. Rome is under the same wind advisory. They are at 55 degrees with rain. Kiev is 42 degrees and clear. Kabul is 50 with haze. Hong Kong is 66 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 46 degrees and clear. And New York is 25 degrees Fahrenheit and clear. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased. And these people live around the world. All right, this first course here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy looks like Trump has inadvertently kicked off a global tax war. This is by James S. Henry out of D.C. Report. Before Trump even signed the new tax law, there were troubling signs that it is the first shot in a global tax war that threatens working people and the public pension plans that sustain them in old age. The Trump bill, which reads like a wish list for Goldman Sachs and its clients, has already triggered an aggressive race to the bottom in international corporate tax rates, rules, and regulations. It is the exact opposite of his campaign promise to help the middle class. Well, duh. When the mainstream American news has failed to notice, of course, are the global responses, including Australia's finance minister warned that its economic growth rate might fall by a third unless it responds fast to the Trump Goldman Sachs legislation. Accordingly, he promised that Australia will soon slash its own corporate tax rate from 30 to 25%. He said even that rate may be too high. Just this week, Argentina's conservative president, just last week, Argentina's conservative president, Mauricio Macri, who reportedly maintains close ties with Trump, announced plans to cut Argentina's corporate tax rate from 35 to 25% by 2020. In Europe, Austria's new government just announced that it is considering a similar reduction. You know, Austria with the neo-Nazis in parliament now. In Europe, Norway cut its 25% corporate income tax rate to 24% this month, and more cuts may be coming. And France's corporate tax rate will be cut from 33 to 27% by 2022. Britain moved preemptively last April, cutting its corporate tax rate from 20 to 19%, with plans to reduce it to 17% in 2020. South Korea, Mexico, and Chile are also actively considering corporate tax cuts in response to the U.S. measure. The Argentinian corporate tax cuts are especially troubling because they may well turn out to be an ominous precursor for what may happen to Social Security in America. Well, of course, they always try things out in Argentina. You know, killing a president in the presidential palace, taking over the government, imposing the corporate vulture economic system and trickle down, and then they have to kick that guy out, and he goes to Spain and gets tried for war crimes or human rights violations. That guy. Okay. And then they're going to try it. Let's see how we can cut and get rid of Social Security. Macri, channeling how the American tax cuts were drafted in secret and then rammed through without hearings, trumped cuts in pensions through Argentina's Congress last week. Okay. Congressional Republicans have tried for years to weaken Social Security and undermine its finances in the hopes they can kill the most popular social support program in the country. They hate America. They always have. An indication of that approach emerged with regard to CHIP, the popular children's health insurance program. It finances often life-saving medical care for more than 9 million children and 300,000 pregnant women. CHIP was enacted in 1997. One of its co-sponsors was Senator Orrin Hatch. And on the 17th of December, Hatch indicated that America cannot afford to continue the program because they got to give a lot more money to billionaires so they can, cater more events on their yachts. Maybe I should get back in the yacht catering business again. Times were great. The cost of CHIP is about $15 billion annually, roughly a tenth of what the Trump Goldman Sachs tax bill will add each year to the federal debt. Remember when Republicans said the federal debt, the deficit, the federal debt, the deficit? They don't know what either one is, but they hated both. The complex and hastily drafted Trump-Goldman Sachs tax bill makes at least 121 key changes that will impact more than $8 trillion of federal tax revenues over the next decade. Actually, I think it's more like $11 trillion. Trump and his sycophants claim that the corporate tax favors more than pay for themselves. They assert that the big cuts in corporate tax rates and other favors for business will prompt much more U.S. economic growth. Yeah, we saw that. Fire a bunch of people at AT&T right before Christmas. Make a big deal about how you're handing out $1,000 to 200,000 employees when there's going to be another round of layoffs by Easter. Creates more jobs. Well, I guess it has to. They got to hire more people for payroll to cut those checks. And, the severance documents. There you go. Okay, last course here at the chef's table. And I should say that we really have enjoyed sharing our curated menu here with you folks today. For Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays and West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, this last item on the menu is by Stephen Rosenfeld out of Alternet. The Trump administration is resurrecting one of the most heinous practices of the 20th century under the guise of stopping illegal immigration from Central America. In a report by Nick Muroff of the Washington Post, the Department of Homeland Security is evaluating separating detained children from their parents as one of several anti-immigration measures in response to an increase in migrants crossing the Mexican border. These measures, described on condition of anonymity because they have not been publicly disclosed, would also crack down on migrants living in the U.S. illegally who send for their children. That aspect of the effort would use data collected by the Department of Health and Human Services to target parents for deportation after they attempt to regain custody of their children from government shelters. I don't know. I hear a lot of boot clicking here. Separating children from their parents was a notorious tactic used by Nazi Germany in its mass arrest of Jews and other targeted populations during World War II. In North America, the U.S. and Canadian governments also separated Native American children from their families a century ago. In fact, where did Hitler learn about separating children from their parents in these situations? Yes, from the same country where he learned about eugenics. Using children as informants to target and subsequently arrest parents was a devious tactic employed during the darkest moments of World War II. And later, East Germany put it into great effect. In fact, I called it the Stasi quo. It's just the way things are. The Trump administration justified this approach as a tough but necessary deterrent for illegal immigration, citing an increase in November arrests as a pretext for considering these actions. Actually, these arrests are down overall. But this guy hates black and brown people. I should have mentioned, and I'm sure everyone heard over the weekend, the holiday weekend, how he referred to Haitians as just, full of AIDS and others, other Africans or blacks won't go back to their huts once they see America. Oh yeah, he's not a racist. Yeah, LOL. The most contentious proposal to separate families in detention would keep adults in federal custody while sending their children to HHS shelters, Muroff wrote, then noting that the DHS children's shelters are currently near capacity. That implies privatized detention centers could be drawn on. Job builders. We're just building jobs on the backs of unfortunate little kiddies. Well, they should have thought about that before they made the 2,000-mile trek by themselves to get to their parents. The little criminals. The idea of separating children from their parents was raised in March by then Secretary of Homeland Security, yes, John F. Kelly. He's not in the Trump administration for nothing. There's a reason why he's now chief of staff. Well, he told CNN at the time that the children would be well cared for as we deal with their parents. What do you mean, deal with their parents? I have this feeling whenever I hear deal with their parents in these situations, it harkens images of, people somehow falling, into the ocean from helicopters from a great height. Well, he was around when they were teaching the Argentinians how to do that, and the Hondurans and others. So we ought to know. Kelly did not move forward with the plan, in part because of the backlash it triggered, administration officials said, and also because illegal migration had plunged to historic lows. He's so old school. He looked at the evidence and saw that it really wasn't politically expedient, and he's a military man. He knows when you're outflanked. But since then, right-wing anti-immigration activists have pressed the administration to revive the option. I keep hearing Stephen Miller in this. Right-wing anti-immigration activists have pressed the administration to revive the option. When Trump says a lot of people believe, he's talking about Stephen Miller, and maybe Stephen Bannon, and maybe even Kelly. Well, the Post quoted Andrew R. Arthur, a Center for Immigration Studies fellow, who said, the parents that would undertake this perilous journey to the United States would be less likely to do it if they knew they would be separated from their kids, and Arthur called it a reasonable step. Yeah, a reasonable step if you're into Teutonic BS. The Post noted that migrants under age 18 who arrived without a parent must be turned over to HHS within 72 hours of being taken into custody by the DHS. The shelters where they are housed are designed to be more like boarding schools than grim detention centers. Boarding schools. Okay, the detention centers that they live in are pretty grim, but maybe if they built their own, detention centers, like they used to do in Nazi Germany, and we could call them like stalags. They could live in bunks, in nice wooden structures. Wouldn't that be grand? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we'll carry on more about this and even more tomorrow for our Wednesday edition at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we sure hope you join us then. Of course, that will be Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Maybe there might be a little, religious meme there, and maybe there won't. Maybe it's just another egg dish with a hollandaise sauce. Could be. But join us then, because we'll obviously have even more to speak about. And stay tuned for the rest of the day. Many of our national feeds will be still celebrating the holidays, but they got some great best of. And where they don't, if they're just off the feed, we have some great alternative programming here at Netroots Radio. So stay tuned 24/7, 365. And we will see you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.